Our next guest is a very, very interesting man. Investments in companies like Uber and Nest. So success really isn't the question. The question is, how did he arrive today? Did he come via Uber, via Chopper, or direct from the future? I think that's going to be the first question that Alexia Tsotsis asks. Please welcome to the stage Bill Maris from Google Ventures and Alexia Tsotsis.
Thanks, Jordan, for setting up my first question for me. It's always hard to open this stuff. So did you hear what she asked?
No, I didn't.
How did you get here? Did you helicopter in? Did you take an Uber?
No, I just flew in from the West Coast and took a car here this morning.
Just a black car?
Yeah, an Uber.
An Uber,
Yeah.
okay. That's not... And you didn't come from the future?
No, I did not.
But, so I was reading an article about you backstage really quickly. And in the article, you have a very interesting quote, and I think this is why Jordan asked the future thing. If you asked me today, is it possible to live to be 500? The answer is yes. So I'm asking you today, is it possible to live to 500?
I'm really glad you asked that question, because I think the science fiction headline of that answer really does a disservice to the reality of the answer itself, which is that for generations, physicians and researchers have worked really hard to try and diagnose, treat, and prevent disease. And so I'm interested in the people that are doing that, and if that adds 5 years to people's lifespans, if it adds 10 years, or it adds a few days, I think it's a worthy pursuit. But at the beginning of this century, the lifespan in this country was about 40 years. Now it's about 77. In Western Africa, lifespan is still about 40 years. And that's a distribution problem. And so if we're really interested in the answer to the question, we should think about adding 30 years to lifespans around the world, which we can do today in a lot of cases.
So do you think that there's a baby being born somewhere that will live into, 2,500?
I think there's a ton of work that has to be done science-wise to even think about answering that question. I think it's possible within a generation or two at the most to cure cancer, and that's sort of not a crazy prediction, right? That's something that Dr. Eric Lander, who's really an authority on cancer research, has said himself. And what that takes is a dedication to using the tools that are in front of us now to work towards that solution. So the first human genome was sequenced in 2004. It took about 15 years and $2.7 billion. And now you can sequence a genome on a machine that can sit on this table for under $1,000 in a couple hours. And that's just in the last 15 years, which is a huge sea change.
It's like Moore's law, but for
we're at what I would call
cartilage printing.
I call it the transistor moment for life sciences. So what the transistor enabled for computation is what the Human Genome Project is enabling for our bodies. And it's going to be the next 25 years in life sciences are going to be really surprising, I think.
So best case scenario, what would need to happen in order for that baby born in Brooklyn to live to 500?
We've solved a lot of the technical, not all of them, but a lot of the technical problems around sequencing the genome, detecting errors, and being able to technically correct those problems. We're talking about cancer, for example. There's a whole world of infectious disease and degenerative diseases of aging that doesn't touch on completely. But what it takes is a commitment from people, from all of us, to say, this is just as important, if not more important, than a lot of the technologies that we spend our time talking about, whether it's drones or things that make you look at your phone more. There are other technologies in the world worth investing in that don't get the same kind of attention and coverage that are really worthy. And they takes real people and real scientists doing real work to work towards that. So it takes an awareness and a commitment.
So there's another really famous venture capitalist that's all about longevity. He personally thinks he is going to live until 120, Peter Thiel. So what differentiates you from Thiel other than the fact that
he's a billionaire, I think, and I'm not.
So maybe he's right. Have you thought maybe that means he's onto something?
Look, I think it's great that people are talking about this topic, about longevity. But again, getting lost in the science fiction part of it, none of us, I think, can make a prediction that we're going to live to be 120. Today's a gift, right? Any one of us could have something.
Not today, Death.
It could be any day, right? And so it's really, and I say that in all seriousness, and I'm not just talking about asteroids from the sky or a giant earthquake. Anything could happen, just crossing the street. I know a cancer researcher here at Columbia who was actually treating my father, who died of glioblastoma.
I'm very sorry.
And my dad asked, "How much longer do you think I have?" And he said, "That is not a question I answer anymore." I said, "Well, why not?" He said, "Because the last patient that asked me that question, I said 6 to 12 months, and he felt really great that he could have time to talk to his family, walked out of the hospital, wasn't looking, and got hit by a car." So he didn't have 6 to 12 months. So I would never make a prediction around longevity in that way, but I would say as a culture, as a society, if we value health and wellness and well-being, and we support it via investing, which is what I'm trying to do as much as possible, then I think as a society we can advance those goals and do away with a lot of the suffering that is probably will seem needless when we look back, say, 20 or 30 years from now.
So are you doing anything personally? Are you taking vitamins? What vitamins are you taking?
I don't take any vitamins. I eat a lot of kale. Green smoothies are my vitamin, that sort of thing. But there's a lot of studies that you can look at that some will say you should take omega-3s, and we all know how conflicting these studies can be. But I think the most recent recommendations are that multivitamins, for those of us in the world who are fortunate enough to have basic good nutrition, are at best neutral and potentially actually even harmful, so I don't take any real supplements.
Speaking of supplements, Thiel, again, who does take random things, has also called Google Ventures' portfolio company Uber the world's most ethically challenged company. Do you agree with that characterization?
No, I don't agree. I mean, a lot of these questions, you're asking me a lot of things that are about headlines, which I expect, and I'm glad you are, because this is a company, the fastest growing company that we've ever seen. Not just that we've ever invested in, that we've ever seen. And anytime a company grows that quickly, Snapchat, Uber, Google, Facebook, you can just go through the list, is going to bump into challenges. And it's how they respond to those challenges. Do they take it seriously? When you get to be a real company, you get held to a higher standard, as you should, around privacy and how you treat your users, et cetera. And I'm actually really pleased with the things that Uber is doing internally to take that seriously and address the concerns.
So how many of you guys took an Uber here? Raise your hands. How many of you guys are concerned that Uber's not respecting your privacy in some way? Okay.
So, just for the benefit of those that can't see, I don't know, maybe half the audience raised their hands?
Yes.
And then for the second question, maybe like 2 or 3 people?
More like 5.
5 people? 5 people raised their hands.
So what is Uber doing to address those 5 people's concerns?
I think that is a great question to ask Uber. And one thing I learned a long time ago in this business is to not be a spokesperson for our companies. They really need to speak for themselves, because at the end of the day, we're minority investors. We have a voice, we have certain values, and we have a board observer seat, and we try and make those things known when things happen that we don't approve of or we think could be done better, try and share the mistakes we've made. But the companies, and Travis of all people, he wants to and will speak for himself. So I would ask Uber, and I think if you just sort of look at recent news, they're making an effort in these areas. And I think that's what we should judge, not just this company, but Snapchat or any company, is how it responds to those challenges.
What's your best Travis Kalanick story?
I learned to never tell Travis stories, but
come on.
Actually, I do have one.
The one you're not allowed to tell.
I do have one. It's not like crazy or anything like that. It's when we invested in the first round of Uber, my partner David Crane and I went to see Travis to talk about the round and to see if there was a way that we could invest and maybe help the company grow. And I told Travis that we would tell him the same thing that I told Matt Rogers and Tony Fadell when we invested in Nest, which is in the 2 rounds we invested in Nest, which was, we really think that we can help. We'd like to be part of this. What does it take to take it off the table? We don't want to get in an auction. We're not looking to save money on the valuation, and hopefully you're not looking to crank it as much as possible. And Travis said, well, here's what it's going to take. Here's the price. Here's what I want the round to look like. Are you on board with that? And we said that we were. We shook on it. And that is exactly the deal that we did. And Travis was as good as his word, and that's the kind of entrepreneur we look for. He did not come back to the table and say, we have an offer for 15% more, 20%, and he easily could have done that. And so I think that's my best Travis story, because it really speaks to the way that we've seen him run the company, which is different from the cartoon sometimes that gets portrayed.
Why do you think the media has turned him into such a cartoon? He's actually not really this evil, like devilish figure trying to take down taxis one by one. He always struck me as a kind of quiet person, unless he was talking about Uber, and then he'd talk your ear off, and he'd be like, Travis, it's my birthday, and he'd be like, Uber's killing it.
I think he does like to talk about Uber, and I don't blame him. I think the reality is that when you're the founder of a company that's growing quickly and getting a lot of attention, we probably all said things that were taken out of context, or said things that we didn't mean, or we shouldn't have said. And I think part of the role of that is also the media, which is where people get built up and then they get taken down, and they get built back up and taken down, and kind of why we're interested in those things, I don't know, but we're trying to influence the company in positive ways, and I think they're responding well. I think so. I'm actually proud of the steps they're taking to fix some of those things.
To switch to something completely unlike Uber, there's a pretty famous image. So I need the image.
Oh.
Bring it up.
What is this going to be?
Image.
Oh. That's the worst picture of me you can find? There are worse pictures out there than that.
I think you look kind of dashing.
There's 2 icons and me in the middle. Again, more billionaires than Bill.
Billionaire.
No, just Bill.
You've sat next to a lot of billionaires. Didn't you sit next to Kevin Systrom at Google?
Kevin and I sat next to each other right before he started Instagram.
And then Ann Wojcicki at your first job.
And I sat next to each other, and now I sit next to you, so I might be next.
Three's a trend.
Right.
So this image has become kind of symbolic and not of something particularly positive in our field, which is the failure of a product. So what happened? You could leave the image there. It's so good.
Oh yeah, leave it up all day.
Leave it up for the next.
Make a trend on Twitter.
What happened? What happened to the?
So for me, that picture is a lot like the picture of Michael Douglas with the giant cell phone that everyone thinks is funny, but at the time, that was the state of the art. And I think what it says to me is that's how quickly technology is changing. We had a new platform. You've got John Doerr, Mark Andreessen, all 3 of us who thought, well, this could potentially be something really important technology-wise. And it's hard to see ahead even a year now. And
especially if you're wearing something on your
when
face,
you're wearing something that blocks your vision, it's harder. But that it reminds me of that photo of from Wall Street of Michael Douglas with the phone, because it's fun to look back at, or funny to look back at, whatever way you want to look at it, because technology moves so quickly. At the time when we were talking about that, it seemed like this could be something huge, and Google Glass isn't dead. They're still working heads down on the product, and I think it's best for Tony to talk about the future of Tony Fadell, who's leading it now, to talk about the future of it. But I'm not embarrassed at all by the fact that we make bets like that, because if you're in this business and you don't expect failures or to get it wrong sometimes, you're never going to do anything significant.
So I've actually heard that the pause on Google Glass is more of a marketing stunt than anything else, and that they're going to relaunch with a huge consumer consumer focus in Christmas of 2015.
That team and Tony don't engage in marketing stunts.
Okay.
So I don't think there's any.
So no big relaunch where they're Warby Parker.
I actually don't know.
Okay.
Again, I would Tony to talk about that, but I actually don't know what the plan is, but I know that they're working hard.
So there's a pretty famous interview of Larry and Sergey, your bosses, that Vinod Khosla did. And they
3 more billionaires. This is like the billionaire talk.
You ever feel poor?
Yeah. Actually, it's funny. The serious answer to that question is, I feel incredibly fortunate. And it has nothing to do with money. It has to do with the opportunity that I've been given to use the $400 million a year we have to invest in technologies that might change the world or might make it a little better for people. So I actually feel incredibly rich. I wouldn't trade that for any amount of money in the bank account.
So yeah, no, you're accurate. Why doesn't Larry and Sergey take that $400 million and instead of giving it to a VC, like go to the Tenderloin and completely rebuild that area, or East Palo Alto, or many of the pockets of poverty that actually do exist in this area filled with extreme wealth?
Larry and Sergey are probably 2 of the most underrated philanthropists in the world. They'll probably end up being like historic philanthropists. Google itself has given over $100 million to local communities since 2010 or so. And just because they don't always put it on the front page, I can say from my own observation, from my own experiences with them, they're incredibly generous people. And I think being generous in an anonymous way sometimes is probably more of a gift than putting your name on something.
So this interview that they did with Vinod, they made a joke about Google Ventures being an algorithm. And then they said, well, actually, no, that's not a joke. We originally intended it to be an algorithm. And then they said, they keep hiring partners for whatever reason. So I don't think the algorithm's really working that well. Did you yell at them after that? Were you like, why did you throw us under the
In the
Google
long
bus?
list of things that Larry and Sergey say that I could talk to them about or try to explain on stage, that is not like in the top 5. They say lots of things, and the reality is we have 15 investing partners. We do continue to hire partners because we're expanding. We just opened an office in London where we have 4 new partners. We announced our first investment there, and we're just getting started. We're just scratching the surface of the technologies that we're interested in investing in. And I think if you're a computer engineer or Google is somewhere in your job title, you do think about algorithms and ways to use decision support tools and computer science to help you make better decisions, which we do.
So what is in the top 5 things that they've said that you want to talk about?
No, there's nothing that I want to talk about in the top 5. They are. I've known Larry and Sergey since they were in Susan's garage, and they're incredibly charismatic, interesting, big thinkers. And I think Google Ventures. I'm only sitting here because of their vision, in a sense. I only have the opportunity to invest the money that we have to invest because they said, let's start a venture fund. And it will be completely independent. You can invest in whatever you want. In fact, you can invest in things that compete with Google, and we're not going to interfere. And in all the time I've been doing this, 300 investments, 5 or 6 years that we've been investing, longer than that than I've been at Google, never once have they suggested we invest in something or suggested we don't invest in something. And that's pretty remarkable for a company the size and influence of Google to just give that amount of freedom to the venture fund. And it's really important to the way we do our job.
One last question. Do you think Google should buy Uber?
I don't think Uber's for sale.
But if it was for sale?
I don't do what ifs. It's not, I don't think it's for sale.
All right. All right, thank you very much, Bill.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure sitting up here with you.
Thank you.